Larry Brock reads GoFundMe their own terms of service. Witness agrees that the Freedom Convoy met all criteria. Here's the clip.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good evening. Am I on? Yeah. Good evening, Ms. Wilford. Thank you so much for agreeing to attend and sharing your knowledge with respect to your company's involvement in this particular matter. I know that you touched upon it very briefly. I'm getting some echo here. I know you touched upon it briefly in your summary, but I want to put to rest a lingering thought that really has been percolating and almost to this day is still percolating around this particular protest. And it basically had its origins pretty much the day the convoy arrived. And that was this whole concept that this was a foreign influenced movement, that there were foreign monies predominantly flowing into this country to subvert our democracy. And I know that you touched upon a statistic that clearly puts that to rest, but I want to put things in more perspective for you before I ask you the question. This is a campaign that really started right from the get-go, as I indicated, right from the Prime Minister to numerous cabinet ministers to a number of governing members of Parliament. When you attended before the Finance Committee, there was one Liberal MP who even suggested that there was a Russia connection. In fact, the quote was to you, or to Mr. Benitez, I don't know who the question was put to, "We know that Russia has been engaged in misinformation warfare for years. 1 trillion in Russian dark money that is circulating and dedicated to undermining our democracy." That was followed up by a question put to you by a Conservative member that basically said there was a little bit of irresponsibility in speculating about a Russian government connection. He asked you, did you uncover any connection between the illegal protests and the Russian government? Mr. Benitez, the president of your company, responded that 12% of donations came from outside of Canada, and there was virtually only perhaps a handful, if most of donations from Russia. You accept that as well, ma'am?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. And yes, I do.
That was, again, followed up. And the reason I'm getting to this is you agree with me. In fact, it was one of your statements in one of the articles that I read that very early on in your involvement in this protest, there was a great deal of misinformation that you were trying to sort out between fact and fiction. And unfortunately, our national broadcasting corporation, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, known as the CBC, which is entirely publicly funded.
Excuse me, my apologies, Mr. Brock. I've stopped your time. I should note, as has been set as a precedent within this committee, that there has been a vote called in the Senate. And so I wanted to pause the meeting. I do apologize, Ms. Wilford. It's an occupational hazard of being here on the Hill, particularly in this time. Towards the end of the year, there's lots of votes. I will recognize Senator Harder for any direction that he may wish to provide.
Thank you, Chair. The Senate has a 30-minute bell. I propose to leave to vote, but for my part, I would not be opposed to the committee continuing the questioning, and perhaps the committee could accommodate the senators who may be back for their questions.
We have about 2 minutes left, but I'll be generous.
Thank you, Chair. So as I was indicating, Ms. Wilford, our national broadcast organization, the CBC, very early on in the protest, accused the Kremlin of funding the convoy in a January 28 broadcast of Power and Politics while interviewing our Public Safety Minister Mendocino, a claim that the CBC had to walk back days later. He said as follows, "I do ask that because you know, given Canada's support of Ukraine in this current crisis with Russia, I don't know if it's far-fetched to ask, but there is concern that Russian actors could be continuing to fuel things as this protest grows, or perhaps even instigating it from the outside." You disagree with that as well, I take it? Ms. Wilson?
Thank you for the question. As I've said, our records show that 88% of the donated funds originated in Canada and 86% of the donors were from Canada.
And just to put a fine point on that, you had approximately 133,000 donors, is that correct?
That is correct.
1,000 originated in Canada, which is the 86%.
Yes.
14,000 originated in the United States,
Yes.
and 4,000 originated from 80 other countries, which represents 3%.
Yes, that is correct.
And of the just over $10 million raised before the fundraiser was shut down by your company, approximately 9 million of that originated from Canada, which represented 89%. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And only approximately 870,000 originated from the United States of America. You'd agree?
From outside of Canada, yes.
Yes. Outside of Canada, but specifically from the U.S.?
I don't have those exact numbers in front of me.
Okay.
I apologize.
I'm looking at a summary of an interview that you engaged in with the Commission Council of the Public Order Emergency Commission some time ago.
I do apologize that you are now 45 seconds beyond your time. You did have the opportunity to explore the last 2 minutes there. We will now move on to Ms. Bendayan. Ms. Bendayan, you have 5 minutes and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and I think I'll pick up where my colleague Mr. Brock left off. So if I understand your testimony correctly, Ms. Wells, some 4,000 donors actually originated from outside Canada and the United States. Did I understand that correctly?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I don't have those exact numbers in front of me right now during this testimony, but if that's what the prior testimony was, then yes, that was correct. Those numbers were what I had at the time.
Yes, those are the numbers that you provided, I believe, to the Public Order Emergency Commission. Appreciate that you might not have that information before you at the moment. Can you commit to providing the committee of a breakdown of where those donations originated from?
Thank you for the question. I believe we already have, but yes, we're happy to have a follow-up discussion about that.
Just so that I can be specific, because I don't believe that we have that information. There are 80 other countries from which GoFundMe did receive donations in respect of this campaign, and we would like a breakdown of those countries. Perhaps you're in a position of not providing the names of those 80 other countries, but can you confirm to the committee that no donations were received from China?
I do not believe that any donations were received from China. Again, without the information in front of me right now, it's really hard for me to confirm with 100% certainty, but I'm it's as certain as I can be right now.
And can you similarly confirm with respect to any donations coming from Russia?
Correct, yes.
Ms. Wilford, where I left off in my first round of questioning was dispelling and highlighting the disinformation and misinformation being spread by the Liberal government, the Prime Minister, the ministers associated in higher positions involving in this convoy, as well as our state-sponsored CBC. Before I move on, I also want to highlight a comment that our Prime Minister made to our House of Commons on February the 9th, that protest funds were linked to crime. We are working very hard with partners at different levels of government to make sure that the flow of funds through criminal activities is intercepted. You would agree with me, ma'am, that my review of all the evidence that you have given so far by way of Finance Committee, as well as the interview with the Public Order Emergency Commission, there is no evidence that any of the funds originating to your platform were proceeds of crime.
Thank you for the question. That is correct.
And I understand that your platform, your crowdfunding platform, is the largest in the world. Is that correct?
Thank you for the question. Yes, that is correct.
And by its very nature, I've done a little bit of research. You'd agree with me that you are not politically aligned with any particular government in the world or ideology. Is that correct?
Thank you for the question. Yes, that is correct. We are an open, nonpartisan platform.
Okay. As well as you are not aligned with any particular religious cause. Is that correct?
Thank you for the question. Yes, that is correct.
Okay. How will you then respond to the suggestion of bias? And I appreciate that Mr. Benitez is not here to defend himself, but when both you and he attended at the Finance Committee, you had an opportunity, much like you did today, to provide an opening statement. And on Mr. Benitez's behalf, the president then of your company, he opens up with this particular line. On behalf of everyone at GoFundMe, we want to acknowledge the impact of the so-called Freedom Convoy on the citizens of Canada, in particular the residents of Ottawa. Do you agree with me that that is a form of bias?
Thank you for the question. That was the name of this campaign, and I believe that's all that he was trying to convey.
Well, perhaps we'll agree to disagree. He could have easily said the impact of the Freedom Convoy, because that's exactly what it was called. The information that Tamara Lich initially presented to you was not labeled the so-called Freedom Convoy. That is an opinion that the president of GoFundMe, which is supposed to be neutral and not to be aligned with any political ideology, that's what he said at committee. So do you disagree with me that that's a form of bias?
Thank you for the question. I understand your point.
Understand or agree?
And it was not intentional.
All right. Okay. I want to move on now because some of my colleagues have asked you specifically about timeline, and I've got several questions regarding timeline. From all intents and purposes, the moment you receive the request for crowdfunding from Tamara Lich and your review, not you personally, but your team and the trust and safety team that works with you, there was nothing untowards with respect to the description of the Freedom Convoy. Is that correct?
Thank you for the question. Yes, that is correct.
Nothing in the, and I haven't seen the actual wording, but I'm just basing it off of narrative that I read attributable to this. There was nothing within that description that promoted either implicitly or explicitly the use of harassment or violence, correct?
That is correct.
And that is why your company saw no reason to deny the opportunity for Tamara Lich and her partners to fundraise on your platform, correct?
That is correct. When this campaign was created, it was within our terms of service.
Right. And I'm looking at your terms of service, and under prohibited conduct, I don't have a page reference, but it talks about paragraph A sub 8. Paragraph A indicates not to use the services to raise funds or establish or contribute to any fundraiser with the implicit or explicit purpose of promoting or involving, and under sub 8, user content that reflects, incites, or promotes behavior that we deem in our sole discretion to be an abuse of power or in support of terrorism, hate, violence, harassment, bullying, discrimination,
Mr.
terrorist financing.
I've given you a lot of runway there, sir.
Just to confirm, Ms. Wilford, February the 4th, 2022 is the day that GoFundMe suspended the campaign for the reasons you've indicated, for the record, for violating the terms of service. Going back to the CBC misrepresenting to the Canadian public, on February the 10th, in a report about the protest convoy, CBC Radio's The World This Hour said that the GoFundMe ended a fundraiser for the protesters over questionable donations to the group. You disagree with that?
Thank you for the question. I do want to correct that on February 2nd is when we suspended the fundraiser. This effectively meant that all future donations and withdrawals were paused. We continue to do our diligence and removed the fundraiser on February 4th.
This is a report from February the 10th, ma'am, and the words, I just very carefully use the words. GoFundMe ended the fundraiser, not suspended the fundraiser, ended the fundraiser for the protesters over questionable donations to the group. That is false, correct?
Thank you for the question. That is false.
I understand that in and around the same time that the convoy protest was happening here in Canada, there was a similar protest in Canberra, Australia. Are you aware of that?
I am not aware of that.
I did some research, and it was to protest the vaccine mandates in Australia, just like Canada. And coincidentally, not only did you suspend and ultimately terminate in Australia as you did in Canada. You're not aware of that?
Thank you for the question. I mean, there were a number of similar campaigns protesting vaccine mandates, so I am aware that the team was looking at it, but the specifics of the Australia one I am not aware of right now.
Would you undertake to provide me information on that to confirm?
I'm not sure I understand. What would you like me to confirm?
I'd like to confirm the nature of the protest in Australia, the timing of it, the reasons why it was suspended, and the reasons why it was terminated.
We can certainly discuss that.
Discuss with whom?
It's a lot of information that I just need to get together with our team. So forgive me, but I came here to discuss the Canadian protest.
I do, at this point, I want to recognize, my apologies,